So I got cut off because I got all preaching in my concept of the electric grid. One of the last ideas I wanted to bring up about the electric grid is that I think that we should use, like the microscopes, how we laser in on ants and kill them. We can use that microscopic technology through satellites directed at a specific area. I just thought of a good idea. Directed at a specific area, like those locations in the desert, so that we can have that light go directly into a source of storage, a capacitor. And then we can build, that was one of my good ideas, have the solar panel on top of, so the solar panel just on the ground that gains the solar energy, as well as the satellites redirecting and refracting like a mirror to direct the light and give it a focal access point through the ozone layer that's small enough that doesn't destroy the ozone layer, and then it goes directly down into that same area to build capacitor storage that is outside of the city underneath those solar panels, which would be idealistic, or even have the capacitors underneath the ground just in case there is a nuclear fallout, that we have the capacitors underground, and then we can, even have like military storage bases close by or something, so survivors can run over there, take out, like they have underground areas, like military, they can have underground areas, and then they have electricity down there and storage, with rations and stuff. These are just ideas of fallouts, guys. But this really did stem from the electrical capacitance that we need to maintain the electric grid, since the ley lines are being overworked, and we are not, as a united world, doing our job to maintain our resources due to this wonderful concept. So I would suggest doing something like that, since Elon Musk has that power, and he should not have that power. This is something that our government should have. That's why monopolies are dangerous. That's why privatizing space is dangerous. And this regulation needs to be changed. Because one man should not have the power to dictate if the Ukrainians or the Ukrainian armies are able to defend themselves. They should not dictate what happens in a war of people that are persecuted by their own government. Not one man. The United Nations should have that. Well, and I understand that because Russia left the United Nations. They left our agreement. And I guess we have to respect that. But at the same time, not dealing to that specific case by scenario, one man should not have that control. I understand now why we had to privatize it, to protect other nations where their dictator is separating them to do whatever they want to them, and we still have a treaty to protect and to serve and to assist with other countries within that country, or with other states in that country. That's what complicates things. But I do think we should, the whole one world order is not typically a bad thing. Because if you're like me and you have somebody that looks like you going to other countries doing criminal activity, and then you go there and you get arrested and you're like, this isn't me, and now you're in jail for a crime you did not commit. But how can they prove it when we don't have a one world order, a unified national agency or committee that oversees all this, that can look into your case and say, okay, well, they were over here all this time, and then they went over here, so they weren't even in that country when this crime was committed, therefore they are not the one. This is why. So when people talk about the mark of the beast, one world order is not the mark of the beast. Do you see? When we talk about 666, we're talking about 3 dimensions. Where do we live? We live in the 3-dimensional realm that is dictated by time, which is the 4th dimension. Now, 6 is the 6th dimension. How many layers from heaven to hell do we have right now? For people that are in the spiritual community, they understand the different layers of hell, right? How many layers do you have to go down? How many layers do you have to go up to salvation? This is also analogous to the different layers of structure: the public, the city, the state, the federal, the central intelligence agencies, the presidency, the United Nations, or antitrust, the United Nations. These are all areas that represent a layer of elevation. Why do you think the United Nations is of the world? See. What is also of the world? This is the devil's playground. What is the devil? He's a fallen angel. Whose is the world? If you believe in Yahweh, he's a God. Do you not see how this is analogous? There was never separation of church and state. There was never separation. There were people that actively chose to keep their factions private, and then there's a faction, occultists or other religious factions within the government that implement that understanding of how these levels work on that framework, especially now when we're dealing with cloning people. If we have the technology to clone people, if we have the technology to make it appear that they are human, that even if you open up their skull, they still have a brain just like a human, but they're not. How can you deny that there is technology that demonstrates that the soul, which is the electromagnetic frequency generated by your brain frequencies, can be extracted? Energy transfer, the energy of the soul. When you die, all your energy is released. When you have sex, all of that pent-up energy is released. That's energy exchange. Battery source. Food for thought. But the electric grid, those are my ideas. Use the satellites, focal, the energy, minimal issues dealing with the ozone layer, and keep it on military ground, on federal ground. Why? Because if you're going to deal with laser technology, that is some very hot, very deadly technology that is going miles down to create this capacitance for the energy to be stored in. It's very dangerous. The federal government is the one that generates everything for us. They are our God, okay? They provide everything for the city, the state, and the public. So why don't we do like we do in church? We thank, we give gratitude, and we give donations to our federal government. The donation is when we die, all of our assets, if we don't have children, if we don't have a trust fund, if we don't have any of that, all of our assets, the trust fund that is created in our birth certificate, all of that goes back to the federal government. That is our donation for them allowing us to live. Just like our parents, they didn't have to take care of us. They allowed us to live. Just like the community. I wasn't killed by my community. But right now, the community I'm in, even though some of them do come after me, I'm allowed to live. Do you see how this is analogous? This is such a bigger ecosystem on so many levels. We really need to think about it a lot more thoroughly. And the reason our public is struggling is because of those other greedy people that we need to get out. Not just out of office, out of businesses, out of memberships that give them benefits and hinder us.